Welcome everybody. Welcome to the DSK's first ever series of DSK Talk. Here we'll be talking for knowledgeable experts, for creative geniuses, and the future of our generation and the future leaders of our generation that have inspired me, that are going to continue to inspire you guys. Hopefully when you do come across these videos, it can really inspire you, but not only inspire you, to trigger some new methods, trigger some new creative ideas, and hopefully add value to your life today. It's your boy Nish, and today we have a very special guest. It's my good friend. His name is Johnny K. He's a founder, one of the founders of Versus, a really cool sports, specifically football and lifestyle cultural platform, as well as a manager of one of Grime's legends, which we'll get into more later today. Yes, my friend, it's my friend Johnny here today. Can we give a round of applause for Johnny? How you doing, my brother?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course, man. Thank you for coming down in December in this cold. Yeah. But I think to get straight into it, I like to start whenever we have discussions to just so that people understand where you come from rootedly. Because to have a discussion, you can really better understand someone when you know them from the beginning, right? So tell us about Johnny, who you are, your upbringing, and where you come from.
I grew up in Battersea, South London. I was born and raised there. It's me, initially my mum and dad's, and I've got a little brother. He's 2 years younger than me. We moved around a lot, but all was sort of in the confines of Battersea. So that was really, as a child, like my stomping ground, really. My mum is from Barbados.
Nice.
Yeah, she's one of 8 siblings. The younger few were born in the UK, and the older lot were actually born in Barbados.
Okay. And yourself?
And I was born in the UK. My mum was also born in the UK. My mum was born in Middlesbrough. So her older siblings were born in Barbados and moved to the UK. And then her one sister and her younger brother were born in England. And then my late father, unfortunately, passed away when I was a kid. But he's from Yorkshire.
Okay.
Half English, half Asian. Yeah, grew up in Battersea. That's where it all began.
That's sick. And obviously Battersea, south side of the river. And football, I'm gonna go straight into it. Like football, I know you're a man that's created platforms for football specifically as well. But what does football mean to you? What is footy to you in your life?
It means everything. There's only 2 things really that move me in this world, this life that we found ourselves in. One is music. One is hearing live music. It's hearing someone catch a beat. That pumps for a sound system in a certain way and then causes the crowd to react in a certain way, and the DJ pulls it that is one thing that moves me. And the other thing is being at a football match and trying to catch, it's almost to me trying to catch that perfect reload is trying to go and watch your team score a last minute winner and being there. I'll be honest, I don't really care about watching football on TV. Obviously I work at Versus with the guys, and these lot watch loads of football matches. I do watch a lot of football, but for me, both music and football are to be consumed in real life.
That's powerful.
That's both of them, and that's where I come at it from with football. That's where my love of football comes from. That thing of walking as a kid up the steps of a stadium, and then you come out of the concourse and you see that big expansive football stadium and you hear the noises. From a really early age, that moved me. So that's where my love of football comes from.
No, I think there's a lot of us that share that as well. Football is from young. Do you remember those stickers?
Of course,
what are they called? Match attacks? No,
there's all sorts. There's bare different
back
ones.
in the days.
Panini,
those. Do you know what I'm saying? And you're right. Physically experiencing a football game compared to watching it on television is 2 different experiences. So that's wonderful. So from the back of football, where did the idea of Versus come from? Let the people know.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this. I didn't start Versus.
Yeah.
Versus started by my 2 friends and colleagues, Corey and Lewis. But the story of where it came from was really interesting.
Yeah.
They were both working at Complex, the big US culture platform Complex in the UK. Our boss, a guy called Austin, got a license to operate Complex in the UK. Corey and Lewis joined that early on. Corey was running the sports desk. Lewis was doing social. And they, between the 2 of them, cottoned on to something that outside of this, I didn't know these guys, but I'd noticed it as well, was that football was finally becoming more culturally interesting in this country. I talked about it already. I grew up absolutely loving football, right? And I still love football, but culturally, it didn't offer very much. There has been cultural crossover in football.
It was more them as celebrities, and you watched the sport. That was it.
Yeah, it was. And the cultural crossover was like Oasis or the Happy Mondays, and then wearing like I'm wearing Stone Island today, but those sorts of cultural references, I didn't really care about them very much.
Yeah.
And the big moment we always talk about as a team is when Paul Pogba signed for Man United and Adidas announced the signing with like Stormzy rapping and Pogba dancing. And I think for them and for me, even though I didn't know them, it was like, oh wow, like, is it happening? You know, and I think that we look at where football is at now, that cultural revolution has happened. But but those guys, they're working for Complex, and they went to Complex in the US and said, can you invest in us to go big on football here? Because we think football is becoming more interesting. You know, it's really going to be really similar to what like the NBA and hip hop is like. Complex were like, we don't care about soccer. So at that point, they were like, why don't we just start our own thing? So those guys did Versus like part-time basically for like 2 years. And then 2 years in, I was the first person to come in and work on Versus full-time. When I came in, those guys were still working on Complex half the time and Versus half the time. And I came in to basically try and make it work. You know, can we make this platform work from a business perspective, basically? And you know, fortunately, 3 and a bit years later, we've managed to do that, right? And you know, hopefully, in time, we'll be onto even bigger and better things.
It's going to be a staple name, I think, in the UK alone, and then Europe, and then the global. I'm sure you got the ideas. But like for 3 years, it's where it is now, and I'm seeing it, and I'm so gassed to see you guys get where you are. But when did you know like it's gonna work? Like at what point did you think, oh shit, like it's actually coming into fruition now, and it's like almost automated now at this point?
I wouldn't say it's automated. It's still it's far from that. But there's a really funny conversation that I remember. It's only funny in hindsight. I was walking to an ex-girlfriend of mine, and it must have been in 2021, like near the start of 2021. It was still cold, and my boss rang me. And these times we weren't going into the office still. It was like another weird COVID period, so we were working from home. My boss rang me and was like, look, I've got to be really honest with you. I don't know whether long term Versus is going to be like a sustainable business. He was like, you know, this year it might be that at the end of the year we have to look at maybe you coming to work for Complex, or we just look at like maybe just wrapping up the whole thing, because I know you've only been here for a year and a bit, but the guys have been doing it for another 2 years. We're not really seeing the audience growth. We're not really seeing the like revenue growth that we would need in order to make this like a proper long-term sustainable business. And I said to him, I was like, his name's Austin. I said, Austin, I've got this secret plan I've never told you about. And he was like, what is it? And I was like, we're going to break even this year. We're going to make a profit. And he was like, Johnny, in order to make a profit, we would need to make X amount. I'm not going to say what that amount is. And I was like, I think we can make that. And he was like, Johnny, like, come on. In 2021, we actually ended up making double that amount that he said. And it was about halfway through 2021, we did these 2 big deals with Nike. And I think at that point, when we were right in the middle of it, I remember us having a conversation, me, Corey and Lewis, and being like, I think this is actually going to be a thing now. We finally got, you know, one of the biggest brands in the world to like really back the platform, you know, with serious cash, you know, investing in like big projects, and we'd never had that before. And I think the one project that signed off with Nike was more than we'd made as an entire company in our history. And I think at that point when we did that deal, it was like, this can be a thing now. You know, this can be a thing.
Nike came there, Nike listened out. Complex didn't. Nike listened out.
Yeah, they did.
No, that's good. And when we say Nike listened out and Complex didn't, it's more to do with timing. It's to do with how you spoke, who you spoke to. There's so many factors to it, as we know, when you're asking for things to happen. But like, even so, up to that point, how was your life like every day? What was like a day in the life for you until you chased that contract? Do you know what I mean? Like compared to, which I'll ask you later on, which is after that point.
Yeah, it's so interesting, like looking back. So I joined Versus, Ryan. What the guys had done is they'd built like a decent sized audience. I think when I joined in 2019, we had 40,000 Instagram followers. Because they made these like viral Facebook videos back in the day with like Anthony Joshua and Conor McGregor, it's bare weird. They had like over 100,000 likes on Facebook, and we had like a few thousand visitors to the website every month. So there was like enough there for me to work with. And literally all I did was just email relentlessly every brand and agency under the sun, and just went out there pitching the hell out of Versus,
Right.
saying literally this is the future of football. You know, football and its relevance to like fashion and music is where the culture is going.
Yeah.
And I say this a lot, that people did not care about that. That genuinely they didn't.
Yeah.
In 2019 and the start of 2020, even some of the biggest brands in the world, I went into them to talk to them about how football was becoming this new youth culture force, and genuinely they looked at me like I was talking French.
Yeah.
You know, those same brands, we work with all of them now, really.
Yeah.
Those ones that didn't get it back then, plus a whole host of other brands that I never thought we'd be able to work with, which is great. But that's what it looked like, you know, in simple terms. It was emailing brands relentlessly, doing meetings, and like evangelizing the brand and just saying like, this is the future of where you need to be. Like, forget working with a fashion publisher, forget working with a music publisher, forget working with a pure football publisher. Like, work with us, because we are all those things in one place, and that's what young people want.
Yes.
They don't want it siloed. They like want all of these things to like come together in one place.
Yeah.
And it took a little while for anyone to buy into that. And shout out to Umbro, because they were the first brand
To come
in my time that ever
Saw
heard that
vision,
and immediately were like, no, we understand this vision and this is where we're going as a brand. And you know, you might not think that Umbro are like the most like forward thinking or cool brand or whatever, but like I will tell you for a fact, they were the first one in the time that I was at Versus, before any of the bigger brands that were like, nah, we buy into this idea. And we did a project with them. And you know.
But you know what's interesting, because it's like you're pitching to them saying, come on, it's really obvious. But that's because what I realized, I don't know if it's the same for you, it's because you've lived that truth. So for you, it's very clear. Like you said, you know what you want it. You know what the youth want it in. They want it in the format of here's the art, here's the culture, here's the fashion, here's the productivity. Give it to me once that makes sense. But it's like speaking to the right people in these big, massive multi-million-pound companies, and finding the right person who can kind of almost share that same life experience for them to connect with it. And I feel like that's probably partly what happened to Umbro with you in that position, because where was Umbro? When we were growing up, Umbro was up there. Umbro was the brand.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And that logo is, everyone knows that logo. And that era where Umbro kind of died down, we grew up. So now we're the people with money, but also know that logo. It's in the back of our head subliminally. So now the fact that Umbro come in and took that opportunity, it's very clever for them. Very clever for them. But yeah, like, so that was then. So now that all of those partnerships have happened and they flourished into what it is today, what is like a day in a life for you in the Versus world like today?
Do you know what? It's similar. Like, I do still do a lot of the like day-to-day reaching out to brands and going doing meetings and stuff. I think that what's changed today is that brands reach out to me a lot.
The script has flipped.
Yeah, the script has flipped a little bit, and what I've done is I've hired someone he's amazing. This guy called Angus. He's only joined like just over a month ago, 2 months ago maybe, at time of recording, and he's doing a lot more now of the like day to day, like just banging on doors. And it's so funny watching him do it, because genuinely more or less every person that he emails is emailing him back. You know, and I look at when I was doing that role in like 2019, 2020, you know, you get one reply in 20. Maybe. Yes, and he's doing an amazing job of like emailing these people, getting meetings in, and a lot of my day to day at the moment is like supporting him, you know, because he can open the doors. He needs a little bit of help at the moment, like actually talking to these brands about what we can do with them. So it's a lot of that. You know, I do a lot more managing projects, like producing projects now than compared to what I did before.
Okay.
Like in 2020, we literally only did probably like 5 or 6 major projects in a year. This year we'll probably do like 25. And what it means is we're still only a team of 9 or 10.
Wow, that's not.
So we're not big. So it means that me and you know my other colleague Corey, between us, he's one of the founders, have to do a lot of the like project management, the producing of these like projects that we do with brands. So it's a lot of that, and it's also just a lot of trying to get the Versus name out there in different spaces at like a really high level. I think that from like an audience perspective, when it comes to like young, diverse, progressive people who like football, they like Versus. The challenge we still have a lot of the time is that people at a senior level in brands and big agencies, and I'm talking like C-suite level people, still might not necessarily know who we are. So a lot of what I do, and it's, you know, part of doing stuff like this, is to really ensure that the brands from like a top thought leadership perspective is looked at as like the genuine leader of like new football culture.
Yeah, and I think that's brand positioning.
Yeah,
I
totally.
think, and you fully like, you haven't patterned that yet, because then that's when you will be the name. But the fact that you guys are thinking in the different realms of lifestyle, fashion, away from sports. Sports are fundamental. So that's really clever that you're thinking in those scopes and putting your brand in these spaces, so that when you have these conversations with these C-suite people, they're like, oh yeah, we know who you are. What do you want? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's interesting. From that, what is the most interesting story that you've covered in Versus, or you guys have covered in story, that you thought?
The most interesting story that we've covered, that's a really interesting question. I think like one of the big growth moments for Versus is like, I talked about how the brand was started, which was very much in like a football culture lane.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one of the big evolutions of Versus happened in 2020. I joined in 2019 and I saw a real white space in what you might call like kind of purpose-driven storytelling.
Okay.
And it was something that Corey and I and Corey and Lewis talked about a lot when it was just the three of us, and we had another guy, Jacob, who was freelancing, was like, there seemed to be a lot of untold stories around like marginalised communities in football. There didn't seem to be that many people like challenging the authorities, especially like mainstream media.
Yeah.
And when we moved into 2020, we made a real conscious effort to be a lot more purposeful with the stories we were telling, and like it really started with a piece that I wrote around what it's like to be like a black or mixed race fan going to live football in the UK.
Right.
Weirdly, like we looked into it, and although there's loads of accounts from like the 70s and 80s around what it's like to be like a black or Asian person going to football matches, in a modern context, that wasn't a story that had really been told.
Yeah.
And we embarked on that journey, and of course, like a few months into 2020, you had the murder of George Floyd,
Mm-hmm.
which then sparks the biggest global civil rights movement of all time. And I think that what then happened is we suddenly found ourselves at the forefront of the conversation around football and race. And while I won't pinpoint like any specific story,
Mm-hmm.
that period where traditional football media suddenly had to try and be conscious of like race, basically, we know all saw what happened with Black Lives Matter. It forced these huge organizations suddenly to be like, oh fuck, excuse my French, we have not been doing enough at all to like tell these stories to help the people that work for us, any of this stuff. Whereas us being much smaller, we're able to be really agile, and we're able to like give people the platform to tell their stories around this stuff. And I think that when it comes to working with brands, when we made that shift from just being a football and culture platform to being a football culture and society platform, when I said I went into those rooms and people didn't really care about the football and culture stuff, when I went then back and it was more about football culture and then football's impact on society, suddenly your Nikes, your Adidases, your Pumas, and even, bigger blue chip brands than that then became interesting to them, because we were really the only, and we still are, in my opinion, the only football platform that's able to have an authentic voice around those issues.
Yeah, and it's important that you guys do, because it hasn't, I mean, you can argue it's getting better, but there's still a lot of work to be done, like massive work to be done. Like the fact that footballers are feeling like they're going to walk off the pitch is upsetting, because they should be focusing on just the game and the art and like, do you know what I mean? Like doing the best they can to be number one, but they're focusing on all this other abuse that they're getting. And we still see it today. So you guys, you need to continue doing that. That's like a fundamental. Do you find like now that you're partnering up with these big names, these blue chip names, that you have to abide by more restrictions than you were before, that you're covering stories of like immediate things that you guys think that's valuable, that now because you're partnered with these massive names that you know it's a bit of an if and a but?
Sometimes yes, but the truth is, if we're working with a brand on a project, sometimes we'll write some stuff or we'll create something, and truth be told, they will try and like push us back a little bit and say that's a little bit near the knuckle for us. Outside of our work with brands, like no, like we are more, I believe, challenging than ever, to be honest. Like we've gained over time a real confidence to speak on certain issues when we know other platforms won't.
Oh, it's unfiltered, like the stuff that you guys...
it's unfiltered. It's very thoughtful, but it is unfiltered. When we work with brands, and brands do come to us to try and leverage our poignant voice around issues like race, sustainability, the LGBTQ plus community, women's football, misogyny in football, all of this stuff.
Yeah.
When we work with a brand, sometimes it does have to come down a few levels in order for it to be deemed brand safe. But that's okay. And when we're not working with brands, no, like we don't compromise. And we regularly also turn down work from brands where they are trying to leverage that voice in a way that actually doesn't feel authentic to the platform. And that does happen sometimes.
No, that's it's understandable as well from their perspective to a degree, but definitely from you guys' mission and us as fans supporting you guys' mission, because we know we're watching unfiltered stuff. I think we would hope to see a lot of, as you lot grow on the business perspective of it, that you lot can financially support yourselves to be covering more unfiltered stories, because that's what we love to see from this side of the, do you know what I mean? But coming back to, obviously I asked you about interesting stories that you've covered. How about an interesting, like, specific footballer moment, or that you think is really sick? Like, I've got a few. I've
got one in particular.
Okay, go on, hit me with that.
Which I can tell. There's some I can't tell. It's really funny, like meeting footballers.
Contracts. I hate contracts. No,
some footballers, a lot of them, truth be told, you meet them, they're very protected. Even when the camera's off, they're not really free in it, to be honest.
Oh, really?
Others you meet and you get on with them really well, and they will trust you quite quickly, and they'll say stuff that you're really surprised to hear footballers say about other players, about managers, and I can't repeat any of that stuff.
Of course.
It's funny, you become friends with like Premier League footballers, which is like a crazy thing to me.
For being a kid to be like idolizing these guys.
And we'll talk about this more, but like that's what I am. I'm a fan first who is
100%.
Who is, because of the love, found themselves in this position. That's the only reason why I'm here.
Best way to be.
But the story I can tell is that when Jesse Lingard was on loan at West Ham, my club, we got given this opportunity via Adidas to like do just a quick shoot and interview with him. And because he was at West Ham, and because we wanted to talk to him about his mental health journey, Corey, the editor-in-chief, was like, Johnny, why don't you go and interview him? Like, it's a subject you speak well on, you know a lot about, and also like he's at your football club. And we'd never done anything with Jesse before, and I went and met him, and there was a few other media commitments that were happening for him on that day, and we were last.
Okay.
And he comes over, and I'm like, hi, I'm Johnny, I'm from Versus. And he was like, Versus? And I'm not joking, he then, on the spot, recounted a caption that we'd written about him 2 weeks before, bar for bar, from start to finish.
Wow.
And I was like, what?
Yeah, like
how have you done that? And he was like, nah, bro, I love your page.
He's a fan of you lot. When
you
went in there thinking, right, I need to impress this guy.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a real nice icebreaker, but I think that was one of the first moments where we were like at the time, he was probably the informed player in the Premier League. I mean, he won Player of the Month.
Yeah.
I like for the month that had just gone. And for a player like that to be like repeating back words that the team had written about him like 2 weeks before, it was like, wow, like this is a thing. I was gassed.
Yeah.
So that was a moment for
That's
sure.
sick. Like, and that comes from all your not focusing on the attraction you'd gain from your work and your efforts. It's surprising you one day, and this is the rewards of what you're doing, innit? You focus on like you said, you're a fan first, so you love what you do. And then you're working like non-stop, like you said, thousands of emails, and thousands is an understatement because I know it. And then all of a sudden you go into a room thinking, right, this is the next person I need to impress, and it gets to a point where they're like so gassed to meet you, and that's a win. That's a massive win in a creative's eyes. Like a lot of these creatives that are gonna watch this can be like, whoever's gone through that experience is gonna be like, wow, that's the reason why I did 10x the next morning.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? The next morning I woke up for, I'm going to have a banging day today. So that's amazing. So coming from that, what is next for Versus? Tell us exclusive. What's happening in 2023 and onwards for Versus?
2023 is going to be a really big year for Versus.
Love to hear it.
I think that there's lots of different ways I could answer this question. I think the first thing I'll say is the Women's World Cup next year.
Yes, that's going to be sick.
Like props to Amy Cripps, she's our women's football editor. She has done the most amazing job in terms of coming in and like uplifting our women's football content alongside our men's football content. Like as we grow Versus, you will continue to see our footprint in women's football grow.
Sick.
We happen to have someone that I view as in the top 0.0001% in terms of knowledge around women's football, and that's Amy. I I think that one of the big things about Versus is we've always made a conscious decision that we're never going to launch a separate women's football platform.
Along the same
always
way.
going to live on the same platform.
Brilliant.
Always going to uplift the stories from a cultural and societal perspective in the exact same way.
Yeah.
So that's a big thing you'll see from us is more
Yeah.
stuff from women's football.
Yeah.
Because it's more at like a development stage in terms of the culture of the game.
Yeah.
We see ourselves being able to have like a really big impact on like the growth and future of women's football and how it's viewed and what fan.
Especially here, like I'm seeing it more and more. And from an honest perspective, like at the beginning when we were kids, you wouldn't even think of it as anything. But now it's like, who's playing? Like you want to know what's going on. So that's sick. I'm glad you guys are doing that.
Yeah, so that's one thing. The other thing is you'll see us go much bigger on video. We've launched, if you go on our YouTube channel, we've launched like 4 good premium YouTube things in the last month, which has been really good. You know,
Is it focus on YouTube? Would you come to television?
To one day, the plan is to make TV documentaries in football. That's like a secret plan that we have in the long run. You know, we do written storytelling so well. We've translated that into like short form video really well. Like TikTok is our lead platform now. We have significantly more followers on TikTok than we do on IG.
Yeah, of course.
And we started to do some like medium form like storytelling. I think that one day at Versus we would like to exec produce direct like long form football stuff that sits on like Amazon Prime or on a Netflix or on like a BBC Three or any of that stuff. Yeah, so we'll see. One day we'll see. But next year it will be like more, you'll see more stuff on YouTube. You'll see more like original content on TikTok. And yeah, a lot of it will just be doing more of the same stuff. Uplifting marginalised voices, you know, uplifting the cultural elements of football.
100%.
You know,
100%. Rightfully. And just to interject there to add, in terms of women's football, I'm keeping an eye out to one of my, she'll be a friend. Her name is Asmita Ale. She plays for Spurs. And she's doing wonderful. So definitely look into that when you get your time. And yeah, man, she's doing wicked at Spurs. But for Versus alone, what do you think as yourself, not with anybody else, who do you think would be the ideal collab or partnership would be for Versus as a brand?
See, at this point, I would love to see us do something with there's some obvious shouts, but like a Cortez,
a
Clint's, like that's one side of it. It's do a partnership with one of the genuine like cultural leaders within streetwear.
Okay, so now how about high fashion? Give me a high fashion.
And this is the other one would be to do high fashion. I think that like Burberry is the obvious choice. Like they had Marcus Rashford as an ambassador. Obviously Jack Grealish is the face of Gucci currently. To try and elevate one of those partnerships that they have with a footballer already would be amazing. So yeah, I think you will see us do both ends next year. Like Angus, who I mentioned, like he's come on board along with editorial guy called Morgan, really to look at how we can delve into fashion as a thing more at Versus. Like we've done so much work in the like progressive, you know, uplifting, you know, positive stories, you know, challenging stories stuff. Like the next year, I think, in answer to your previous question, one of the things you'll see from us a lot more is like the cultural storytelling, particularly through a fashion lens. We've just done a partnership with CP Company. They were the first company I ever emailed when I joined Versus 3 years ago. And we've over 3 years ago, and we've just launched a partnership with them. I would love to do one with Stone Island as well. But on the high fashion end, like any of the Gucci, Prada, Burberry, and then also like some more traditional streetwear stuff.
Yeah, and you know what? From day one, since I met you, it was the idea of, I call it the Robin Hood mentality. You know what I mean? You're not only trying to aim for the upper echelon, you're also got us lot, and I say us lot. I'm never gonna say the bottom. I'll say us lot. Always, you know, dragging us all along, and I think that's the idea of it until we reach some sort of threshold. You know what I mean? Like, it's that consciousness of going to bed at night knowing that, you know what, I did all right. Because not only am I aiming up there, I'm also bringing from this way. So I think that's really important for people of us, of the next generation of leaders. This is why I want to catch you lot now, so that I can be like, if you lot go off your rail, I'll be like, Johnny, you spoke this, bro. Like, you know what I mean? Like, come on, you know what I mean? So hopefully, not only would that help other people watching us having a conversation, but also help ourselves, you know, like 10 years down the line to say, are we still on that track? Or are we improving our tracks? Obviously, improvement is always better. But yeah, that's like so refreshing to hear that, because I'm sure if it was like, I don't know, compared to Sky Sports when it was at your stage and they said, or what are you going to do for culture? They're like, no, we're focusing on football. Do you know what I mean? Whereas now you guys, obviously with all the advances in technology, we're now at a place where you can think in the realms of other realms because it's so easy to connect. And if we're not utilizing that, then that's the problem. Do you know what I mean? Like we're limiting ourselves, right? So yeah, man, that's really sick. And then advice you'd give your younger self, yourself. If you were speaking to Johnny at 12 years old, what would you tell him?
Yeah. The first thing I'll say on this is that, you know, if I could go back and talk to my younger self, I would not do it. I would not say a word.
Okay.
Because I look at my life today, which is a direct consequence of every bad decision and every good decision I ever made. And I made more bad decisions than good decisions.
Yeah.
And I've been through more hard times than good times. But I look at where I'm at today and I'm like, it all worked out. Fine is not doing it justice. It worked out better than fine. So I can't look back and touch anything that I've done.
Yeah.
It's that butterfly effect. You know, you pull out one bad experience, how much of an impact does that have that changes my course? I'm too satisfied with where I am at to change anything.
That's beautiful.
However,
Yes.
it's just like you are worthy and you are enough. I think that is the thing I struggled with when I was younger. You know, that 12-year-old, the 14-year-old, the 16-year-old, the 25-year-old is that the deep inner dialogue I had with myself said, you are not good enough.
Yeah.
You know, and the truth is I am good enough.
Yeah.
And I can see that now, but it's only a recent thing that I can see that now. And the only thing I do look back on, not with regret, but with sadness, is that that younger version of myself had no ability to validate themselves. You know, and you know, sought that validation from external sources in lots of different ways.
Yeah.
Lots of different transient things that are never going to fill that hole in your soul.
Oh yeah, there's so many factors to it. You got your culture, upbringing, you got your household alone, and then you got your environment that you choose to put yourself. But as a kid, you don't know these things. You're you're like, it's happening to me, innit? And I think that's powerful that you say, letting yourself know that you're not good enough. Like I was lucky enough to be in a household where my parents they were always telling us that, listen, you can do what you want to do. Do you know what I mean? Because look at us doing what we do. So that was okay. And then when I'm in social circles in school, like I grew up in West London, and like my friends in school would tell you, you had to stand your ground or you got bullied is not the word, but you got picked on. You definitely got picked on if you didn't stand your ground. And then that's so easy to conform to the place of I'm not good enough. Especially then we got introduced to social media at our upbringing. And then you're seeing other people doing all these, because no one's going to put anything negative on there, are they? So you're seeing all these amazing things, and then you're walking back and forth doing the same repetitive thing, thinking, what's going on? But it was the idea when I met you early this year at the Levi event. I think we were standing on the courtyard bit. Me, you, Rax, there was a few other people. Sai was there. Yeah. Novelist was there as well, right? And I think someone offered you a drink, and you were like, no, I don't drink. I've been clean for, I think it was nearly coming up to a year. And then, but before you said that, we'd been speaking for about 10 minutes back and forth on advice that we were sharing to each other and as a group, as creatives. And when you said that, it meant nothing there, but it hit me like, this guy has not only shared so much of information, he's now the most dangerous he could ever be. Because by himself, without no one else putting pressure, or like maybe, you know, you could have been hospitalized or something that was like really life-threatening, and you change your life. Those kind of things happen. But you literally went, no, I'm at the lowest. I'm going to change myself. And now I'm clean. And it's not the fact of, you know, people tell you, get yourself out of the environment. But you're in a party where everyone is drinking and networking and doing their thing. Some people were drinking, but a lot of us were here to build our network and to learn something that day. And that was the main thing. I was like, right, if I'm going to speak to Johnny now, like, I wish I met Johnny earlier. But then, in fact, after you said that sentence, it was like, no, like, there's no better time to meet Johnny than now, because he's the most dangerous now. And if I had met you 5 years ago, it'd probably been stagnant until that point anyways. Whereas that point, I was like, okay, I need to stay in touch with you, because you said you did something yourself. And for me personally, that was like losing weight. Like, you know, I went gym every day. I vowed that I would never get a personal trainer, because if I have to get a personal trainer, I would call myself weak. Not sending shots to anyone that has personal trainers, and big up personal trainers on your craft. But for me personally, it was like a battle. Like, if I have to do that just to get, for my own health, I have to get somebody else to gas me up and encourage me, I'm doing it wrong. Like, I need to be able to prove it to myself. So when you said that, I was like, though, that's massive. Like, though, when you're saying your younger self and confidence, it stems from that. I don't think you are that person you are, even if I don't know you back then. I think you're 10 times better, and whoever you were before would be so proud of you. Yourself would probably want an autograph now of yourself. How about that?
Thank you.
And that's an achievement and a half, right? Yeah, that's sick. But it was mad pleasure to chat to you today and just to pick your brain on that realm. And we're gonna go for part 2, and the people are gonna see part 2, and when we go into your other creative side of your life. But before we wrap it up, I want to ask you what you're wearing and why you're wearing it, man. Because this is a fashion platform.
Yeah, what am I wearing? Start from the bottom. You might not be able to see it on camera, but
Okay.
I'm wearing these extra chunky Uptowns. That's what I call them in America, Air Force Ones.
Air Force Ones.
I've got the Daily Paper bottoms on.
Yeah.
So annoying. These Daily Paper bottoms, right? I have them in 4 different colours.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got
Sick.
these same bottoms in 4 different colours. And I'm glad I bought 4, but there was actually 5 colours, and they don't sell them anymore. But these are my day-to-day go-to. They're the Daily Paper bottoms. They're the right fit, the right level
Stretchy.
of bagginess.
They got the stretchiness in it.
They're not really stretchy. They're more just fixed, a nice cargo fit, but more of a trouser
Nice
material.
silhouette as well.
Yeah.
And the black, you can't go wrong with black.
Can't go wrong with black Uniqlo t-shirt, and then this Stone Island
Quick
overshirt.
stony on the
Yeah,
top.
this is my favourite item of clothing I own. It's also the most expensive item of clothing that I own.
Right.
It was a treat to myself that I was encouraged to buy by my girlfriend. I was actually going to do a talk with Wingstop
Okay.
about race, and we were literally about to go there. We were on Carnaby Street, and I was like, can I just go have a look in Stone Island? And I went and bought this with her.
Don't tell me you wore it there, because that would have been
I wore it there. Yeah. I literally put it on
Okay.
in the shop and wore it there.
Okay.
But Stone Island is an important brand for me. I talk about live football. Stone Island and CP Company are these brands that straddle high fashion, streetwear, and then football terrace wear.
Yeah.
You look at the stuff that I'm interested in. If I'm looking for a brand that represents the stuff that I'm interested in, these brands are perfect, right? Especially they're in fashion at the moment. It's even better.
Yeah, even better. And they're never going to go out, bro. I don't think Stoney's going to go anywhere for a long, long time. But it makes sense. It represents you for who I know you as. Definitely is. And I love it. Black and white you can't go wrong with it. Do you know what I mean? And just to round it off, I'm going to ask you a quiz question. I asked all my guests this. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to give you 3 options, and you're going to have to pick an answer. So the question is, T-shirts are the most popular clothing item ever. Roughly how many are sold each year? You got option A, 100 million, option B, 700 million, and option C, 2 billion.
C, 2 billion.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, of course. Yeah, logically. But when some years they're exponentially higher. And it's and it makes sense for why, but it is also an eye opener in its own perspective. So if you are going to start brands, start with a T-shirt, because that's where it goes. But thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure. Spud me, my bro.
No worries, man. Thank you for having me.
And man, we'll come back and we'll chat. Thank you.